season starts here, the Vancouver Boat Show.
Hello and welcome to the Vancouver International Boat Show virtual seminar series, sponsored by Freedom Marine International Yacht Sales, the premier choice for exploring the passion of yachting. Thank you for joining us. The seminar will begin in one moment. If you are having technical difficulties, you can reach me, the online moderator, via the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Questions for our speaker can be added in the Q&A box, also at the bottom of your screen. I will ask them at the end of the presentation. It is our pleasure to present Boat Building in the Rockies with Rick Reynolds. Over to you, Rick.
Thank you, Maureen. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on what part of the country you're in. I appreciate you taking the time and interest in our little boat building exercise. A little bit of history here. I started sailing in Lake Ontario. Then in the 70s, late 70s, moved out to Vancouver. On Botogramping 26, both of our boys were preschool at the time. We sailed on the coast and circumnavigated Vancouver Island at the end of our stay out there. Since then, since the 80s, we've been landlocked either here in Calgary or in Saskatoon, but we chartered a fair amount. Then in 2000, we bought a 40-foot steel boat, Ted Brewer designed. I retired full-time in 2001, and after 6 months of quite a bit of refurbishing, in 2002, in July, we left for Fiji via Hawaii. The boat was in Fiji a bit over a year. We put it up in the heart at Thunder Point over the hurricane season. And then in October 2003, we sailed it down to New Zealand and actually had the boat shipped back from there. I went back to work for a couple of years, then fully retired. And thought I needed a project. And I enjoyed the refurbishing that we had done on the Ursula. It's pretty extensive, but it was rushed. And I'd also been over the course of the last prior 20 years, been interested in kit boats. So I contacted Spencer Yachts and said I'd be interested in a kit boat. This is the Ursula, the boat that we sailed down to New Zealand with. That was a black hull when we bought it. And the furling gear in and etc. Anyways, so I contacted Spencer and Malcolm. Malcolmson said, geez, yeah, we'd be glad to do that. Come have a look at my boat, which is a Spencer 46. And it's a beautiful boat, beautifully done inside. Great jointry work. And I'm thinking, oh, it looks like a lot of work, but I think I'll be okay. So then we sailed Malcolm's boat a bit, and we went up Sunshine Coast and sailed on the sister ship to what I wanted was a center cockpit boat. So this is a center cockpit Spencer 46. And yeah, we said, okay, let's do this. So the Spencer 46 is a 46 foot boat. Its beam is 13, draft is about 8, displacement is over 30,000, 10,000 pound keel. The boat kind of started as the 1330 in the mid 80s or late 70s, I think, which is, there's been quite a few of them made. People might be familiar with that, the 1330 Spencer. The difference between the 1330 and the 26 or 46 rather, is not much. There's the keel, the rudder straightened, and there's been the stern and the bow slightly modified. So in actually January the 1st, 2006, that's Malcolm there, Malcolm Wilkinson, and I signed the contract to have the boat built. And it was going to be built in one of the empty hangars at the Victoria Airport. And this is the inside of the hull after it's been done. The construction is a cored glass construction. You can see the coring starts just below the top, runs down to just above the water line, and the rest is non-cored. This is Ursula, my wife, standing in the opening for the skeg. And the copper strips that you see, we just put in there. That's for the grounding plane, a grounding plane for a HF radio. And it's quite amazing when you see the inside of a 46-foot hull. It seems huge, and it's not until some bulkheads get put in that it starts to become a much smaller boat. We had the tanks, the engine, the bulkheads, and the rudder installed as part of the kit. This is the engine. It's an Isuzu 70 horsepower naturally aspirated engine. These are actually the fuel tanks. They're about combined is about 500 liters, and the water tank's about 500 liters, and that's Malcolm there. The bulkheads are 1-inch marine plywood. This is one of the larger bulkheads being constructed, and here as it's being a couple of them installed, that's the V berth forward of that front one, and the salon is aft of this the closer bulkhead. And you can see it's been glassed in. It does but it gets glass all the way up, and then obviously it gets glass to the deck when it gets put in, when deck gets put on. Here is the hull being lifted out of the mold. The round hole you see at the front here, that's the bow thruster tube. And here is the deck mold being lifted off the deck. And there, the two are about to be joined. You can see the top of the bulkheads here. These four, and then there's one at the very front for what defines the chain locker. The keel, this is where the keel's been poured. You can see the inside of it here. These are 1-inch stainless steel rods embedded in the keel, and there's 14 bolts. They're the little interesting sidebar. The lead being the density. If you don't clamp down the steel rod and base, they'll float. It's 10,000 pounds is the weight of the keel. And here the keel is being dry fitted to the boat. The keel, we didn't leave the keel on because for two reasons. One is it would make the boat too high to go through the snow sheds to come out to Alberta. And secondly, it's just another 2 feet to climb up and down every time you go in and out of the boat. So inside the boat, when it's all put together like this, what you have is not much. Here's the engine. That's the 2 fuel tanks. This is the end of the, I'm sorry, these are the 2 water tanks. This is the end of the fuel tanks, the 2 fuel tanks on each side, the engine obviously. This is the back wall of the cockpit. This is the bottom of the cockpit. And this is the bulkhead that separates what will be the galley chart table from the main salon. In the main salon area, before the deck was put on, I had 12 sheets of 3/4-inch marine plywood placed in there for the floor. So there's the proud owners. Little do they know what the journey ahead of them lie. And here's the boat loaded on the trailer, heading on its approximately 900-kilometer journey to our place, which is, we're located roughly halfway between Calgary and Banff in the foothills. Here it is heading off down our private road that's shared by 3 other neighbors. It left about noon on a day, and it arrived here getting towards dusk on the next day. There it is coming down our driveway, part of our driveway. It's getting darkish. So basically we unloaded in the dark. The supports for it, it had been designed, actually Don, I'll talk a bit later, Don designed it, and he said, here's all the parts you need. And then we had a portable generator there, or portable welder, I should say. And we constructed supports, if you like, once the boat arrives, because before that we had no real dimensions to work from. We also, one of our neighbors also has a crane, fortunately, and so we were able to offload the 10,000 pound keel. So there it is. This is mid-October of 2006. The boat has arrived in our driveway. This is the Quonset behind it, and inside the Quonset is my workshop. You know, you start off with a boat like this, or a hull like this, and there's kind of no place it's going to leak. And by the time you finish it, there's back on a number 500 potential leak spots in that boat, or any boat. There's a flight and a half of stairs to get up to the boat, and then another half a flight to get down inside it. So that every time you went up and down, you went up and down 2 flights of stairs. So probably like 3 times Everest over a course of 10 years. So we're still in 2006 here. We put an entrance onto the boat, wrapped it in insulated construction tarp, and covered it with a hay tarp. This is my workshop, which is also constructed that year. There's a belt sander here, the big table saw. This is a router table back here, jointer, a miter saw, compound miter saw, drill press, the dust control, and bandsaw, and over in the corner that is a fitness planer. Also built a fiberglassing table. That's the mat, and it's the roving inside here. Initially, we had a 45-gallon drum of resin. So we're now starting 2007. So the very first thing we did, you kind of start from the lowest part and work up. We put in the battery box, or the structure for the battery box, and Ursula climbed in there and did the glassing, or we did the glassing. And the rest of that year was spent putting in the floor and doing the glass. There's a lot of fiberglassing on the boat that we did, because everywhere that a structure touches the hull, it gets glassed in, and the glass usually consists of a mat roving, 4 or 5 layers, or another mat roving for seven layers. And you fare a curve from the joining. Usually it's on a 90-degree angle. You smooth that angle out, and you cut the mat, and then you mix the resin, and you have about 20 minutes to work. That's really a 2-person job, and there's probably well over 1,000 pieces of fiberglass in that boat. Like what you're looking at there would have 7 pieces of mat roving on that one piece there, and then each one of these guys gets done, and that's sort of one layout to be glassed in. This is another section of the floor that hasn't been glassed. It's been faired in, and just a quick note. So how do you know how to orient the floor? Well, on the outside of the boat, there's a theoretical water line, and you level the boat to that water line, 4.5 side to side. And then you use a level inside the boat to in fact, you can see a level right down there, the yellow thing. You level the boat side, you level the floor side to side, fore and aft. And then you don't know, then you build around it. And once the floor is in, you keep the boat somewhat level, but it's not as critical because then you can start using a square or whatever to do the rest. You don't know how the boat's going to sit until you put it in the water. So that we'll get to that when that happens. Okay, so 640 hours or 50 hours in 2007. 2008, it's more of the floor, putting the joists in, glassing, and the big job was to put in, these are the gussets for the chain plates. The chain plates go through the deck and attached to these. There's 3 on each side. And then once all the floor joists and everything are in, then everything gets sanded or used a grinder. Tremendous amount of dust to smooth everything out so it can all be painted. And then there it is painted. There's epoxy on the top of the joists and paint. These are the openings for the takeaway and vents for the fuel tanks. We tested each tank. This one actually had a leak on the starboard, on the port side, so it took some doing to get it fixed. These are the water tanks, actually. That's a water tank there, and that's the fuel tank down there on the starboard side. Once the joists are in, then the plywood gets fitted, and along each side where the plywood touches or the floor touches the hull, that's all gets glassed in. And there's several hatches here on this main salon. So 860 hours in 2008. 2009, the floor is now in. We're starting to add what I call the furniture. This is the U-shaped settee in the main salon. Here's actually the face of the aft head. This is the countertop, the cupboards, the bottom, the lower and upper cupboards. We also put in the wall that defines the engine room wall in the galley. And this is laying it all out with cardboard. And this is looking at the layout from inside the engine room. And this is after the wall was put in. You can see it's glassed up to the bottom of the cockpit. And this is the countertop. So that was 2009, 750 hours. So 2010, we're continuing to put in the cupboard faces and cupboards and drawers. All of this comes off to be arborated. This is the walkway to the aft cabin. These are drawers, these are cupboards down here. Countertop. This is the aft head, the wall on the aft head, again glassed in, and you can see the glassing. These are the dividers, if you like, in the aft head, and they're glassed in as well. So there's a lot of additional strength that's added to the hull as a result of all the structures being glassed in. So once all that's done, then the faces are all taken off to be arborated, and again, the surface is all ground down and painted. Again, a very dusty, messy job. We had, for the glassing, we used full face respirators, which is what I had on here, plus coveralls, etc. Doing this kind of work. Also lined the engine room with soundproofing. That's what you see here. So that was 2010 rather, with 1,400 hours. Next was to put the strapping onto the ceiling onto which the ceiling panels can be fastened. And here are the ceiling panels that have been cut and fastened, and they come off to be arborite put on them. Also did the electrical this year. This is the top here is the AC component. The bottom part is the DC component. So there's a negative, there's a neutral. And then the various bus bars, fuses. There's the big shunt for the ammeter. This is the inverter battery charger, Freedom 2000 Sandrex. I might say go back here just a moment, that Xantrex makes a lot of good products, and I bought the battery monitor, the control panel, and the smart charger, a smart alternator charger from them. And then I installed it about 5 or 6 years later. I set them in some problems, and they said, "Oh, we stopped making that just like 6 months after I bought it because they all failed. All 3 of those items failed." This is the distribution panel. The bottom is the AC panel. The top is the DC. There's another DC panel that's over above the chart table as well. Here's the underneath, behind the scenes, if you like, of the AC. And this is behind the scenes of the DC. I will say that I was pleased with the outcome of the wiring and how it looked and how it all fitted on the wall, because on that Ursula, the boat that we refurbished went to Fiji with, it was just a dog's breakfast. The wiring was horrific. The other thing we had to do was I wanted to have all the bulkheads, the flat surfaces, with arborited, but there was the fiberglassing that was done to fix the permanent bulkhead to the boat was about 1/4 inch thick. So I had to put 1/4 inch plywood everywhere, and then Ursula ferried the plywood up into the fiberglass. And then we used contact cement on the plywood and construction glue on the fiberglass part to affix the arborite panels. And we're working with primarily on the large bulkheads, arborite sheets that are 5 by 10. And so it was a bit of a challenge to pre-cut, then put the contact cement on, and then get them inside the boat without touching anything and get them up. But we got pretty good at it towards the end. So all the flat surfaces on the boat are arborite. Anyone that were permanently we had to do on the boat, like the bulkheads, but everything else came off the boat and got done in the shop. So this is that panel has come off, and the arborite's been put on and trimmed up. So that's 2011. It's 1,200 hours. 2013, we did the plumbing. This is the plumbing for the forward head into the holding tank, out of the holding tank, either over the side or a pump out. This is the primary distribution for the fresh water. 2 tanks coming in, the manual system and the pressure system. The manual system, there's a foot pump in the 2 heads and in the galley. Also in the galley is a manual saltwater pump. And the pressure is the hot and cold pressure. And here is the hot and cold pressure in the engine room. Also that year, we did the port lights. And it's a big challenge when you start cutting. It's not a challenge, it's not difficult to do, but it's mentally, it's a big goal to start cutting holes that size in your boat. So there's the installed port light. The it's one of those. I wish I knew then what I know now. Things I didn't do as good a job installing them. The waterproofing, if you like, leak-proofing. So I've had to redo a couple, and I would have done a different job. This little sidebar here, that's a skylight. No gel coat on the inside. There's no coring, and it lets in quite a bit of light. Oops. Excuse me here. Yeah, this is the inside of the installed port lights, and there's the inside of the excuse me, the skylight, and you can see the coring here. So that's 2012, 1,200 hours. 13, we put in the steering. See the top of the chain is a spoke here. It's in system a Lumar split wheel. Goes down to the hydraulic pump. Out of the pump goes through a control valve and the autopilot pump and down to the stern of the boat. It was a real challenge for me to be putting this stuff in it. It's heavy walled copper tubing that can't be bent by hand. You have to use tools, and it all has to line up. And I think I'm three-dimensionally challenged because there's a huge stockpile, or scrap pile, I should say, at the end of the process. So from here, goes underneath the floor to the back. There's the rudder stock. Constructed these two bulkheads with a lot of glass in them, because there's a bracket that supports the top of the rudder stock, and also the hydraulic pump, the ram that turns the rudder. Also, we installed the tow rail. The tow rail is made in Portland, and then I picked it up in Calgary. It's quite a substantial tow rail. There's that's 9 inches from there to there. Every 9 inches, there's a 3/8 inch carriage bolt, and the fitting of it is a challenge. You're bending it in 2 dimensions, not great bends, but enough that it doesn't want to do it. So we use ropes and come-alongs and the tractor and help. This is our oldest granddaughter, and our daughter-in-law, and my youngest son. This is Don. Don's your neighbor. He's a journeyman carpenter, and he was a tremendous help on this boat. He was the one that designed the support structure for the boat, the stairs at the back. He did the molding around the frame, around the doors. I helped him build the doors. There's 5 doors as such, and he just helped me all through the process. And because I'm not a skilled carpenter more than I used to be, but Don really was tremendously helpful. He put a lot of hours in. 2 more of the doors. This is the aft cabin and the aft head. So that's 2013. There's 800 hours. So if you remember, the boat actually went out to the coast in 2016. So we're getting there. So the next big task for a long time was the trim. So I brought a saw in and the vacuum for the dust control and started doing the trim. So this is like here's the various example of the various curves and of the trim. The trim is a side and a bottom, almost most of them, and so that's the attachment of the side to the bottom, or the bottom to the side, actually. Gluing and screwing. Here's some more. There's a lot of curves in the trim in the boat. The companionway, both fore and aft, are teak. Everything else is cherry in the boat. All of the trim. This is just the walkway, the trim, ceiling, sides. Little digression here. This is the how the handrail through the main salon is attached. There's a steel bar with 5/16" bolts welded to it. That was fiberglass to the ceiling, and then a spacer was made, and then the handrail attached with bolts through to the nuts that are in the bar in the ceiling. My oldest is high. The headroom in the boat's quite high. My son is 6'6", and he can stand in the center of the boat. So if you're a short person, that handrail is too high. And actually, the port lights, if you're average person, are too high as well. Travis has a great view, but anyhow, so we'll have to put some handrails on the handholds on the bulkheads here in the future. We also put this is clear fur, 3/8" strips we cut with splines to bring together, and did that in the feed berth and in the aft cabin, behind the stove, and where the bookcases are in the main salon. And this is a ceiling now fitted. Here's your port lights, or your skylights rather. And that all comes off. All that came off for two reasons. One is to put the lights, the interior lights are LED strips that are sunk into the countersunk into the panels, and also to get it to all the deck fittings. This is just the forward head with the wood trim, bids and all. It's a finicky. It took me a long time to do the internal fittings of for all of the joints, because usually have two angles that you're working with. 2014, 1,139 hours for everybody. All the trim that's in the boat is all countersunk. That the permanent trim, the non-ceiling trim is countersunk, and they all have to be plugged. So that, and then once it's plugged, then Ursula had to finish all the internal trim in the boat in place. It's a brush-on oil urethane finish. And here is the ceiling trim being finished as well. So 2015, 877 hours. So 2016, the boat's going to go to the coast this year. So we're going to put the barrier coat on. Fiberglass isn't waterproof, and so the part that's sitting in the water needs to have an epoxy barrier coat put on. So there's it's Interprotect 2000 is what we used. It comes in two colors because you're putting 6 coats on. So you put a white and then a gray and a white and a gray and a white and a gray. Because then you've got 6 months before you need to put the anti-fouling and put it in the water. And I thought, oh geez, we do this in August and no problems, we'll have the boat in the water. Well, I didn't get there, so I had to sand the outer layer enough to braid it enough to put another coat on before we put the anti-fouling on. So also put the hatches on. That's the aft, and that's the forward. I didn't have a slide that showed it, but if you can see this strip here on the ceiling panel, there's a couple tail of them. Those are LED strips. That's how the lights. That's the interior lights on the boat are these LED strips. Batteries went in. There's 8 225 amp hour AGMs there. The other thing to note here is this cable that runs along here is going to the bow thruster at the front of the boat, and it's a huge cable. If I had to do it over again, I'd bought the bow thruster early in the process, but I would have put a hydraulic thruster in because that cable there's such a draw on it on the bow thruster that the hydraulic one is a better answer. So we're now 2016. The boat's going to the coast, so we've got to build a cradle for the keel. So fortunately, the crane was still in the neighborhood, so we use that. We also used it to take the entrance structure off the boat. It's interesting how many times I was asked if that was a permanent structure. Is the cradle for the boat, for the keel rather. So it's time to go, just about. So we're going to have a little bit of a celebration, but it is Alberta and it is October, so we have snow, early October, we have snow. Here's some friends and family that came to drink our bubbly and wish us well. So the truck arrives, the keel is being loaded in its cradle on the trailer, and the trailer is being backed underneath the boat. And I was so nervous here because at the end of the day, the end of this process, the only support holding the boat up was this support and the sister over here on the other side. It's held with that strap, and the boat's moving, and I'm thinking, Jesus, after all this work, this thing's going to end up on its side. It didn't, but I was certainly anxious. There it is, taillights down the road. Ursula and I are sitting in our vehicle having a glass of Prosecco to celebrate. So this was an afternoon. The plan was the next day I was going to drive to the coast, and then the following day I would meet the boat at Shelter Island Marine in Richmond. We'd unload it and we would go. So the next morning I get up to the pass, King Horse Pass, just east of Field. There's my boat sitting on the side of the road, all covered with road dirt and everything else, and there'd been a major snowstorm. The highway was blocked, and there's the boat, kind of all dirty. I went back through Radium and out, and the boat arrived in Vancouver Sunday, and here it is on the Monday being unloaded. In the rain. It rained a lot in Vancouver during that period of time. The major job we did initially was to put the keel permanently, mount the keel permanently on the boat. And that Sikaflex you can see there is, we've done that. The boat has been lifted off the cradle and the keel and about to be placed down. The other things we did initially was to finish off the bow thruster and the propeller shaft. And here is the boat going in the water for the first time. It was built in 2006, and this is 10 years later. It's going to get its toe wet. It's an anxious moment because is it going to leak? There's 6 through hulls. There's the bow thruster, and there's the stuffing box for the prop shaft. And the bigger anxiety is how is it going to float? And it floats almost perfectly. There's no fore and aft, side to side is almost perfect, which was not out of a great deal of calculation, but out of a lot of luck. So being Vancouver, it's going to rain all the time. I've got to put all the deck fittings on. So we've got to build a big structure that overlaps the boat. And there's a 20 by 50 foot hay tarp put over top of it so we could do all the deck fittings. Also, actually, I stayed on the boat a couple nights, but I stayed with friends at Granville Island, near Granville Island. But a few nights I stayed on the boat because when it snowed, I had to knock the snow off the boat because the structure wouldn't support snow. It'll wait for rain. So one of the worst storms, it's hard to see here, but this structure down here should have gone straight across, but it collapsed with the snow. There's a boat inside there. 2016, 1,500 hours. Okay, we're getting close to the end. Here's that's an auto stream. That, let me just make sure I'm using the right words here. Auto stream, it's a stainless steel prop made in Australia, feathering prop. Really a beautiful piece of machining. You almost want to put it on your mantle lock on the bottom of a boat. Starting putting all the deck fitting, the forward chain plate, the rollers. This is the collar for the mast. It's didn't fit the opening. It was there, so the opening had to be modified. The opening was too big, so we had to do some glassing and gel coating. The radar arch at the back, this also functions as the davit. The mast, it's a Selden mast boom vane. The extrusions are made in Europe. The assembly is actually done in North Carolina, and then it had to be trucked across the continent. It was put in the trailer by several strong men, which we didn't have, but fortunately had a crane that could just sneak in the trailer and lift the keel out, or lift the mast out rather. There's the assembled mast. Really got a lot of compliments when that mast was laying on the ground like that. It was a nice piece of engineering. Here's Steve Wright, the shipwright, or the rigger rather, detaching the crane from the mast. And here's the mast with all its rigging up. Well, actually not all of it. We haven't got the furling on the front yet. We also got the cushions made and the mattresses made. Put the anchor on, the anchor chain. There's about 470 feet of chain, 3/8" chain, of which about 120 sitting in the bow. The rest of it's dragged through the boat and is residing on top of the keel at the center of the boat. So the tanks are very regular, so they had to be calibrated. So we had to calibrate the tanks. So you put in a known amount of fuel and water and see where it was on the gauge. So I was inside the boat saying, okay. And I miscalculated, and we got about 6 liters of diesel inside the boat. And if you think about it, you try really hard not to get diesel inside your boat because it's hard to get rid of the smell, etc. It was one of my bigger screw-ups. And that's Kim, who I stayed with, and Kim was tremendously helpful on the coast because all those deck fittings, you need 2 people to do them. So he was a great help. The keel wasn't totally true and side to side and faired in, so there's quite a nice fairing job that was done, epoxy fairing job on the keel. And you can see where I've sanded down. The last barrier coat was white, and I've sanded it down enough that you can see the gray coming through in several spots. So here's the new barrier coat applied, not to the keel because the keel is epoxy, so it doesn't need it. And here's the anti-fouling on, and here's the boat ready to go, and going, and boy, talk about an anxious Rick. I hadn't started the engine at this point in time. The engine had not been started. We don't know whether we think the rudder's going to go the way it's supposed to turn. The boat will turn the way it's supposed to. And I had asked the yard if I could be the last person that said sure, no problem, and then like most times it changed, so I had about 20 minutes here, but the motor started, the prop turned, the boat moved, and there we are, docked. So there's a very happy Rick Reynolds. We were there for a few days. One of the things we did when we were there was to take the boat out for a little dry run out of the Fraser. Got out there, the boat stopped, just stopped dead. Oh Jesus, what's wrong? Dropped the anchor, there's commercial traffic, 6 knots of current. long story short, what had happened was there's an electrical shutoff. It had come undone and therefore closed. It shut the engine down. Had fallen across the starter motor. So when I asked him to, I went down and below afterwards and said, try it again. It arced and we found it and everything was fine. So after a few days, off we go. We're taking it over to Ladysmith, Marina. And again, another anxious time. We didn't have any sales at the time. We had a head sail that came next to one he had. But there's an awful lot of things can go wrong in a boat. And when you've built it, you know how many things can go wrong. But fortunately, everything went well, and here we are in Ladysmith. And eventually the sails arrived. It's a 120, 680 square feet head sail, and a fully battened 3-reef point, 500 square foot main. One of the big jobs once we got it over to Ladysmith was to put the electronics, install the electronics. There's about 14 items in the system, and I installed it, and I was apprehensive, but it really went quite well. And the winches you can see here we put on, those are they're 54s. The primaries are 65. The secondaries are 48s. I also put the propane system in. That's a couple fiberglass tanks we have. So 2017, there's 700 hours. So total, up to that point in time, I put in over 11,000 versus 725. Vast majority of that is with a respirator on and fiberglassing. Don, almost 700 hours, tremendous help. Kim, couldn't have finished the boat without him. Various other people all helped, about 500 hours. So it's about 13,500 hours. And there's been about another 500 hours since then. So since 2017, so we put the canvas on, there's the boat kind of finished up, the radar's on. We had a full winter cover built for it. There's 52 louvered doors on the boat. They're all done now, and the last 17 need to be installed, but they're built. There's some more. That's the forward head louvered doors. There's 32 drawers in the boat. They're all done. The last big item to do is the teak floor. There's about 445 pieces of teak. They're all cut, ready to go. They're 1 3/4 inches wide, or 1/2 inch thick. And then there's 1/4 inch strips of maple, so it's like a teak and holly floor. But COVID interfered, forest fire interfered, so hopefully this spring I can get out and get the floor done. And that's the presentation. That's the odyssey. That's the journey that we've been on for the last over a decade. If there's any questions, I'll be more than pleased to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Rick. We do have a question, and please feel free to add any questions to the Q&A box if you have them. So first question is from Heather Marshall. How did you manage temperature control for the fiberglassing, especially in winter?
Yeah, it's a good question, Heather. We had a furnace. I had a propane, a natural gas furnace converted to propane in the Quonset beside the boat and had ducted it into the boat. So the first winter, that's what we did. The winter of the winter that was in both the front and the end of 2007, we heated the inside of the boat that way. After that, we were able to do our fiberglassing in the summertime. Like what I didn't want to do, because it's closed in and the fumes are flammable, is to have electrical heater, that type of stuff, because it arcs and so we really fiberglassed from early on in the summer, and temporary put stuff up when we're building it. Yeah, and then to heat the boat itself, when we're working in the wintertime, I just block off areas with styrofoam over the doors and that type of stuff, and use electric heat to get the area up to 5 or 6 degrees so that your hands don't freeze and you can dress accordingly. Any other questions?
I don't see any here right now. Is there any other questions for Rick?
Well, I'll give a couple from that often come up from earlier presentations that I've done.
Okay.
One is that a financially viable thing to do a boat like I did or we did? And the answer is no, it's not. It's given the price of used boats and the price of even the newer production boats, this is because of more of an act of love than it is of economics. You end up with a new boat and you very much understand the boat and that kind of stuff, and you learn some new skill sets, but financially it's not a wise move. And the other question that's usually associated with that is, well, how much did it cost? Well, it cost a lot. You say you wouldn't be able to buy a detached house in Vancouver with proceeds from it or the cost of the money that went into it, but it did. It was not an inexpensive endeavor. And another question is, would you do it again? And that's a complicated. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know back when we started this project if I had realized. I originally thought it was going to be 3 years, maybe 5-year project. If I'd realized then how long it was actually going to take, and actually the cost of it, and of course the budget that I had was blown out of the water pretty quick. I'm not sure. I'm glad that I did it. In hindsight, I'm quite proud of the boat. It's a nice boat, and it really sails. I knew that it's going to sail well. They're a great sailing boat, but it was a pretty major chunk of my life for 12 years, 11 years, 10 years. The 10 years that it was here was a big push.
Okay, well, it looks like we don't have any more questions. If anybody wants to jump in now, otherwise we will close out. Thank you, Rick.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for their interest, and hopefully you found it entertaining.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh yeah, the season's